Imagine you are the most powerful ruler on Earth. You control the longest river in the world. You command armies, priests, and millions of workers. You have built structures so massive, so perfect, so impossible looking, that people 2,000 years after your death will still argue about how you did it. And then, one day, your civilization just stops. No more giant pyramids, no more colossal stone mountains reaching toward the sky, just silence, and sand, and smaller tombs that nobody remembers. Why? That is the question historians, archaeologists, and Egyptologists have wrestled with for over a century. And the answer is not what most people think. It is not one cause. It is not laziness. It is not aliens taking their technology back home. The real story is stranger, more human, and far more interesting. Let us go back to the beginning. Around 2650 BCE, something extraordinary happened on the west bank of the Nile. A man named Imhotep, the chief architect and vizier to Pharaoh Djoser, designed something the world had never seen. He stacked 6 massive stone platforms on top of each other, each slightly smaller than the one below, and created the Step Pyramid of Saqqara. It was the world's first large-scale stone structure. It was a technological revolution compressed into one building. Before this, Egyptians buried their rulers in flat mud brick structures called mastabas. After Imhotep, the sky became the only limit. Within a few generations, Egyptian architects refined the design further. The bent pyramid at Dashur, built under Pharaoh Sneferu around 2600 BCE, shows exactly the moment engineers realized they were building at the wrong angle and corrected mid-construction. You can actually see the shift in the stonework. It is like watching someone scratch out a math mistake and try again. Sneferu also built the Red Pyramid, the first true smooth-sided pyramid ever completed. He was experimenting. He was learning. He was laying the foundation, literally and figuratively, for what came next. His son changed everything. Khufu, whom the Greeks later called Cheops, began his reign around 2589 BCE. He looked at his father's achievements and decided to go further. The result was the Great Pyramid of Giza. At 146 meters tall, it held the record for the world's tallest man-made structure for nearly 4,000 years. The engineering precision is still staggering. The base is level to within just a few centimeters across its entire 230-meter sides. The blocks, some weighing up to 80 tons, are fitted together so tightly you cannot slide a sheet of paper between them. Tens of thousands of workers, not slaves, but organized paid laborers, fed and housed and given medical care, moved those blocks across the desert and up ramps we still do not fully understand. This was the peak, the absolute height of pyramid construction. But here is where it gets interesting. After Khufu, after his son Khafre built the second Great Pyramid, and his grandson Menkaure built the third, something shifted. The pyramid started getting smaller, noticeably smaller, dramatically smaller. The Pyramid of Userkaf, built shortly after Menkaure, was a fraction of the size. Later Old Kingdom pyramids were smaller still, and by the time Egypt entered the Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom periods, pharaohs stopped building true pyramids altogether. They switched to hidden rock-cut tombs carved into the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. Why did the pyramids shrink and then disappear? The first reason is economics. Building a pyramid like Khufu's required something almost impossible to sustain: absolute centralization of power and resources. Every quarry, every grain store, every labor unit in Egypt had to feed into that single enormous project for over 20 years. The state had to be a perfectly tuned machine, with the pharaoh as its all-controlling engine. That kind of centralization cannot last forever. As historian Mark Lenner, who has spent decades excavating the Giza Plateau, has documented, the pyramid-building era required a level of administrative control that gradually eroded as Egypt's population grew more complex, and regional power centers began competing with the central throne. Put simply, the pharaohs slowly lost the ability to command everything. But that is only part of the answer. The second reason is political. During the Old Kingdom, the pharaoh was not just a king. He was a god, literally, a living deity walking among mortals. His divine authority meant that asking workers to spend decades building his eternal home was not slavery. It was religious duty. It was cosmic necessity. The pyramid was not just a tomb. It was a machine for transforming the dead pharaoh into a star in the sky, for maintaining the balance of the universe, for guaranteeing the annual flooding of the Nile. Egyptians believed that if the pharaoh did not ascend properly, the world itself could break. But gods can lose popularity. Around 2150 BCE, the Old Kingdom collapsed entirely. Historians call this the First Intermediate Period. It was a time of drought, political fragmentation, and regional warlords. Provinces that had once sent labor and grain to Giza began hoarding resources for themselves. The central government fell apart. And here's the counterintuitive twist. The very size of the pyramids may have contributed to this collapse. Building on such a scale drained the agricultural agricultural surplus of an entire civilization. When drought arrived and the Nile floods failed, as climate research published in journals like Quaternary Science Reviews has shown they did around this period, there was no buffer, no reserves, nothing left to fall back on. The greatest building project in human history may have made Egypt too brittle to survive a crisis. When Egypt reunified under the Middle Kingdom, the new pharaohs built smaller, more modest pyramids. They were not less ambitious, they were more realistic. They understood what overextension had cost their ancestors, and when the new kingdom pharaohs like Thutmose and Ramses rose to power, they made a completely different choice. Instead of building towering monuments visible for hundreds of kilometers, they carved their tombs in secret into the limestone cliffs, hidden entrances, twisting passages, painted walls inside instead of colossal stone outside. Why the switch? Tomb robbing. Every pyramid ever built was eventually looted. Every single one. The size and visibility that made pyramids so impressive also made them perfect targets. Ancient grave robbers, and sometimes the workers who built the tombs themselves, knew exactly where the treasure was. By the New Kingdom, pharaohs had learned a painful lesson. It is better to be hidden than to be grand. There is also a theological shift that scholars like Jan Assmann, one of the foremost Egyptologists of the modern era, have traced carefully. Over time, Egyptian religious thought evolved. The afterlife became more democratic. It was no longer only pharaohs who could achieve eternal life through pyramid-shaped resurrection machines. Ordinary Egyptians began to believe they too could reach the afterlife through proper burial rites and the correct prayers. The pyramid lost its unique religious monopoly. Its theological justification weakened, and without that justification, the enormous cost became much harder to sustain. So here is the full picture. Pyramids stopped because the political power to build them was eroded by time and fragmentation. They stopped because the economic model that made them possible was too costly to sustain without collapse. They stopped because tomb robbers made them dangerous. And they stopped because the religious ideas that gave them meaning evolved into something more personal and more accessible. No single cause, a slow, inevitable convergence of forces. And here is what makes that deeply human. Every civilization that overextends itself, whether through ambition, ideology, or sheer pride, eventually discovers the same truth. The thing that makes you great can become the thing that undoes you. The pyramid was Egypt's greatest achievement, and in some ways, one of its greatest vulnerabilities. Tonight, when you look up a photograph of those three pyramids standing on the Giza plateau, you are not just seeing a tomb. You are seeing the exact moment a civilization pushed itself to its absolute limit, held it there, and then slowly, painfully, learned to stop. The stones are still there, but the machine that built them could not last forever. Nothing that powerful ever does.